Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Yelders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Buenas, this is Cisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations Podcast, Yelder Edition. I want to welcome in all our listeners. If you could do us a favor, and wherever you listen to this podcast, please review it, like it, rank it, do whatever you can to support it. Maybe even share it on your socials so that people can find us, so we could get out this vital message about healing in La Cultura Cura. You know, it's important that we do that. So before we get started, we have a special guest today. She's on our Healing Generations advisory. She's also a partner with the Coachella School District. Her name is Karina Vega. But before we bring her in, I'm going to do the 4 directions, to remind us, so that we could take that little bit of time to remember our ancestors, those that we're connected to. So let me first start out asking each of you to take a deep breath in. Take that breath in, and I want you to face the east. And this is the direction of the men. We want to acknowledge all the men in our lives, even if we don't really know them. It's kind of like that sometimes, But your grandfather, your dad, maybe you have a son, your brothers, your homies, your tios, even your community tios. We want to invite them in. All the things that men deal with, all the blessings that men deal with, we want to bring all that in, all that medicine. And we want them to be here with us. We want to recognize them. And then as we turn to the left, to the west direction, we think about all the women. But before we think about them, we want to think about all our relatives in between men and women that kind of don't fit within that binary. We want to recognize them. We want to recognize all the blessings that they bring us. All the things that hurt them too. We want to acknowledge them and help them along the way. And we want them to help us too. And then as we face the west, we face the direction of our women. We want to recognize our grandmothers, our moms, our daughters, our sisters, our tias, our community tias, our co-workers, all the women in our life, the blessings that they bring, the burdens that they have too. We want to recognize that. And we want them to be here with us in a good way. And then we turn to the left and we go all the way to the north and we think about our ancestors, those that lived before us, those that worked, those that suffered, those that did beautiful things on our behalf, all the ancestors and the elders. We have a lot of elders that during this time of year are lonely, They have to make hard decisions around paying bills, about taking care of themselves. We want them to be all right. We want them to have the resources that they need, the food, the blessing, the teachings, the wisdom. We want them to be all right. And I want to remind you, if you have elderly parents, grandparents, visit them, talk to them. Even if you have elderly neighbors, say hi, be friendly. We have to take care of our elders and that wisdom, that generational wisdom that they have for us, and the prayers they said for us on our behalf. Even before they met us, we want their lives to be enriched and feel good and feel valued. And then we turn around again to the south, and we're going to think about all our children, all the future generations, even the ones that are not here, but the little babies that are being born this time of year, all the children that are growing up, that are in school, that are having to live in today's society. We want to think about them and make life better for them any way we can. We want beautiful blessings for them. We want beautiful life for them, however we can help them. We want to make sure we're speaking their truth and we're listening to them and valuing them. And of course, we have that spectrum between our elders and our youth, our children. We also want to acknowledge the sun, Tonantiu, the beauty, the hope that the sun brings to us, the warmth. Want to acknowledge that. And then, of course, we want to acknowledge Mother Earth, all the blessings, Tonantzin, that gives us the water, food, natural resources. All these things that we have are because of her. And we want to acknowledge that and make sure we're taking care of her. And any decisions we make, any things that we do, we're also thinking of what's best for Mother Earth, for Tonantzin. And then, of course, we want to acknowledge the Creator. We want to acknowledge the energy that surrounds us, that gives us hope, that blesses us, that created us, In Nahuatl, they say, Moyo Koyani. We want to acknowledge that existence, how we create the life for ourselves, and the healing that we're trying to bring to our community and to ourselves. So I just want to acknowledge that. I want you to take a deep breath in again. Thank you all for listening to me as we do those 4 directions, because it's important that we take time to acknowledge our life, the blessings, and also acknowledging the challenges in our life too, as we get to talk about healing, talk about changes and all those beautiful things, So anyway, with that, I want to bring in Karina to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about herself. So, the first question we have for you, can you share a little bit about yourself, your family, your background, and your journey up to this point in your life?
Yes, thank you, Cisco. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored for the invite. So I am the daughter of Jose Luis and Yolanda Vega. They're both immigrants to this country. I, too, the first time that I was brought to this country, I actually was brought here illegally. But I am currently a school counselor working for the Coachella Valley Unified School District. And I do a lot of things here with the community. I've been with the Compadres Network and on my healing journey for about 8-9 years now. I am the oldest of 2 daughters. So there's 2 mujeres, my sister and myself. And my father was a campesino. He was a field worker his whole life. And my mom actually worked for the school district, and she worked for the school district longer than I was alive. So it was just a very interesting upbringing of kind of living in the 2 worlds, not only in like American and Mexican, but also a campesino and more of a blue collar worker. It was just a very interesting upbringing.
That's beautiful. So before we move on, I just want to hear, what does healing mean to you?
So it's very, very interesting. I always think of my dad. Anything that he taught us was always with the dicho. Like anything, like any problem that we had, he always had like a dicho or a story or a riddle or something. And I remember whenever anything would happen, I've always been very emotional. So like I'm a crier. Like I used to cry. There used to be this Folgers commercial when I was young, when the kid would come home from college and he would put like coffee for his mom. And I used to cry with that commercial. Like I always cried for everything. And my dad would be like, mija, and he would take me outside and he'd be like, miras el sol? And I'd be like, sí. And he's like, trata de parar que salga. Trata de parar, trata. Like try stopping it from coming out, from rising. And I'd be like, I can't. And he's like, well, that's the same thing with your problem. Like anything that happens, the sun is still going to come out. Mm-hmm. So why are you crying? And then he'd give me money. So then I was like, oh, if I cry, my dad's going to give me money, right? So I learned like really early on. And only because I feel like that was his way of making a connection with me. He really didn't know how to fix my problem, or he really didn't know how to tell me how to fix my problem. But he knew that it didn't matter what happened. The sun was still going to come out tomorrow. And, then I had money for gas too. So it was kind of a win-win, But in that sense, healing to me really means that you can talk about things, things happen, you had a situation, but you don't have to allow it to define you. And I tell people all the time, I want to transform my pain. I want to transform it. I don't want to transfer it to my kids or to the people around me. And we see a lot of times people that are just transferring their hurt instead of sitting with it and transforming it. So for me, it really is about sitting with your pain, acknowledging it, and then just really being ready for it to leave.
Yeah, I mean, one of my homies, his name's Johnny Williams. He talks about his grandma used to tell him, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
That no matter what's going on in your life, you will get through it. And really, it's about kind of understanding the lesson you learn from it and how to not let it happen again if you can help it. You know, sometimes you're not in control of that. You know, early childhood trauma, stuff like that. We're not always in control of what happens to us, but it's one of those things. It's how we deal with it really sets us apart. So what are the life lessons that you learn from your culture, your family, your life experiences along the way that helped you in your healing and development? And you could include anything like music, art, advocacy, you know, things that helped you with that process in your life. And how are you passing that on to your kids?
Yeah, there's so many things. And my prayer always is like when something is difficult, my prayer to God always is like, what are you trying to teach me? Right? What lesson am I not receiving that I have to go through this certain situation? I do believe that that's something that really helps me kind of ground myself. And I feel like it's an interesting upbringing. My father and mother used to be very religious, and all of a sudden we stopped going to church. And I kind of know why. My dad, he actually saw the pastor of the church, the priest of the church, drunk at like a bar there where we lived. And that really like did something to his faith. Like it really rocked his faith. So we stopped going to church. And I still kind of would go to youth group and I would go to these things, but I just remember him being so devastated, like so devastated. And unfortunately, it became something that was like his healing turned into coping, and the coping mechanism wasn't always the healthiest coping mechanism, right? So, you know, he did drink and do things like that. And I just always remember I've never drank, like I've never, ever, ever. And I think it comes from just seeing how much damage that did to my family and, you know, to the people around me. So that was one thing, like I always prided myself. And even though I got a lot of made fun of, and like, I remember one time we were ditching because, you know, I wasn't a perfect child. I was a pampered child, not a perfect child. But I remember that they like brought me like a tetera with milk in it and cookies because everybody was getting wine coolers and just stuff like that. But my point is that I've always been someone who laughs. Like if it doesn't matter how much I'm hurting, how much I'm a payasa in every sense of the word. And it's funny because my relatives, my parientes, my ancestors were all, my tata, my grandfather, he was a titeretero and he carved puppets for the circus. So I feel like that entertainment, like that, you know, the person on stage kind of has come from my family members. But the coping of really, 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 like, I don't want to say laugh it off because it's not, you know, going away, but let's just have fun. Let's laugh. That's such a healing place for me. And I think it comes from my dad. Like everything was a joke. Everything was funny. Like there's so many jokes that he used to tell. And even like, I feel like my dad was the original creator of the bad dad jokes, you know, like so many jokes that he told. And I mean, I don't know if I can say a bad word, Fiscal, but I want to say a bad word just because.
You can say we're open. This is the Yelder edition.
Yeah. My dad, anytime, and to this day, anytime anybody asks me, like, how are you? I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm great. I'm awesome. I'm amazing. And it's because my dad would always tell me, mija, if somebody asks you how you're doing, you always have to say you're doing good, porque nomás a los pendejos les va mal, right? And well, I'm not a pendeja, so a mí nunca me va a ir mal. And always to this day, like I always think of my dad, like when somebody asks me, ¿cómo estás? Bien, like, estoy bien. And some days I really am, and some days I'm really not. But it's always that like nobody needs to know necessarily what I'm going through. That's a private healing journey that I have, you know, with myself and my thoughts and my maestros and the time that I have for myself. But the people around me don't necessarily need to know, you know, all of those things that are going around. And I do think that I got that from my upbringing and my parents kind of being in their own separate roles, but in leadership roles of like, we're here to serve. We're here to serve. Like you were brought to this world to serve others. You were brought to this world to find out what your gift is. And once you know what your gift is, you have to give it away. And I really, really, really believe that I was brought here to serve. Like I really believe that I was brought to serve my community, to serve the people that don't have the opportunities that I have, and to be that voice. And there's so much for me. There's so much healing in everything that I've gone through in the process of being able to help others. That for me, it really defines healing, and sitting with somebody's pain and helping them put it down for a little bit because it's too heavy. And I've learned that from my upbringing and my community. And I went to 9 different elementary schools.
Wow.
So I went to a lot of different things. So I was like quick to make friends. I was quick. I like right away feel super comfortable with people because I didn't have a lot of time. So I was going to switch schools, you know? So it's interesting that I feel that way. And I know so many people and I love so many people because of that upbringing that I just, I had to make friends quick, which actually worked out really good for me because now working at the district, there's so many people from so many different schools that I know, either as teachers and, they're my colleagues now, or just like the parents of kids that I know that I'm now serving. So it was pretty interesting growing up.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So tell me about how you do that with yourself and build upon those lessons with other people. Is there examples of how you do it within the school, the kids that you work with, or is it families? I know that the field of school counselor has changed. Counselors within schools have changed over the years. One of my friends just became a school counselor last year. He just finished his master's and now he's doing it. But how do you make that a part of your job, and how do you make that part of your life too? Like, and what was your connection with La Cultura Cura that kind of really resonated with you?
So it's interesting. I feel like my life has always been like I'm just kind of an oddball. Like I'm not like everybody else. I'm not like I went to our schools and I was like too light to be Mexican, and then I went to like schools in Palm Desert, and then I was too Mexican to be American, and I just always been kind of odd. I remember I did this paper in college about like your identity and all these things, and I'm just like I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I'm super Mexican in some areas and super American in other areas. It's really interesting. My husband, he was born here. My husband was born here, and I was born in Mexico. But my parents, I want to say like 99.9% assimilated, and his parents didn't. So his parents, only spoke Spanish. They only had like carne con chile for dinner. And my parents, my dad, doesn't speak wonderful English, but both my parents speak English. And we would have sushi and Chinese food and just different things that my husband's parents didn't. So there's a lot of, like, I kind of just didn't fit in. Like, I just didn't fit in anywhere. And then it's crazy because I worked for a zoo for a very long time, and I had a job at the zoo.
Wait, you worked at the zoo?
Yes, I worked at the zoo. I actually got married at the zoo.
What?
That's where our wedding was. Yeah.
Wow.
But my job at the zoo was to bring animals to the students of the Eastern Coachella Valley. So it was a very like specific job. And that's what I'm here in the district. I'm a counselor, but I'm a counselor for the school district, and I'm the only counselor for the whole school district that does what I do. So just very like being able to find that niche. Like, what are you good at and how can you use it to serve others? Like, that's always kind of been my thing. And I never was a big animal person, but I love talking to people and people love animals. So it was just a really, really good way. And there's so many stories. I always tell the story of the tarantula. So the tarantula, it actually has to break its exoskeleton in order to grow.
Wow.
Like it has to break its skeleton in order to grow. And I kind of feel like that's what happens to us. We have to go through this pain, through this like breaking of our outside. Like we have to challenge everything that we know and break through so that growth can actually happen. And a lot of times because it's uncomfortable, because we don't like it, because it's painful, we just kind of stay the same. And it's crazy. There's this saying that says that people die when they're 30. They're just not buried till they're 85.
Mm.
And I feel like that's kind of like what happens to tarantula. The tarantula, if it doesn't break out, it dies. It doesn't grow. And it kind of happens to us as people. We just go and we don't necessarily grow anymore. We end up dying. We end up not like living the life that we were intended to live because we're stuck. And so for me, the opportunity for what I do here to be able to serve my community, to be able to serve others is really in that lesson of who are you supposed to be? Like if you were allowed to continue to grow, if you had the support, the love, everything that you needed to grow, who would you become? Like if fear wasn't your first thing that you thought of, if failure wasn't an option, if you hadn't, got stuck in your susto, what would you have become? And it's so crazy because sometimes I talk to people that are like 18, 19, and they're like done. They're like, yeah, well, this is it. This is my life. And there's so much more out there, and just really helping them understand and see like you're just stuck. Like you're stuck in that susto, you're stuck in the belief that like this is it, this is all you have. And just really teaching them that there's so much more out there. And even if it's with stories, I remember I used to be a teacher before I became a counselor. And here in the valley, we have some they're called papalotes, like the windmills.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a student and we were sitting on the bus and he's like, teacher, agárrese. He's like, hold on. And I was like, what's going to happen? Like, what's happening? And he had never been past the windmills. In his whole life, he'd never been past the windmills. And he literally believed that they were going to push us back. And just like, I was like, wow, like there's so much out there. There's a huge entire world. Like all he had ever done was go to Food for Less and back. And just really like helping anybody see that there's so much more. I mean, this is a specific example, but you know, there's so much more. Like even some of our kids that go off to college, they only get as far as college and back. You know what I mean? And just like really helping them see that there's so much more. And your pain, your trauma, your hurt doesn't define who you are as a person. And you shouldn't let it define you as a person. And I think those are all the things that, like from my upbringing of just like I always remember that Selena clip where, you know, you're not Mexican enough and you're not American enough. And that's why we have frijoles, because we have, you know, our strength to help us push forward. Because that really is, it ultimately, our culture is a very strong culture. We come from people that are very strong and very powerful. And I always remember Maestro telling us, like, stand in your power. Every time you speak, you need to stand in your power and don't be afraid of the voice you have. And those are teachings that I teach my own kids, my own children. My 8-year-old has affirmations that she does every morning. Soy fuerte, soy valiente, soy inteligente. You know, I'm strong, I'm beautiful. And she added, y soy hermosa. Like she added the hermosa part. But just really like the voice in your head needs to be stronger. And if you don't have a positive voice, then you need to create a positive voice for yourself. And those are kind of like upbringings. Like every time I come to a stop sign, I always think of my dad, because he would like try to like brake on his side of the car, even though he didn't have a brake. He'd try to brake on his side of the car. And then when he played 21, because he is a gambler. He's a gambler. He paid 21. So whenever the card would go over like the 21, he would say, "Te fuiste, Marcelino." Like that would be like a quote. So every time that I do like a California stop, like a rolling stop, I always think of my dad, "Te fuiste, Marcelino." So I think of this. So I have all of these phrases in my head of my dad. And I always think like, and I know, I mean, gracias a Dios, my papi's still here with us. But I always think like, man, like I want my kids to have that positive voice of their mom wherever they go. And it's not a negative voice. It's not a like, no puedes. It's a sí puedes. It's a, you know, creo en ti, tú puedes kind of voice. Mm-hmm. And that really is something that culturally, and it's so crazy, Cisco, because I was always so drawn to the calaveras. Like so drawn, like I wanted them, I wanted to have them, but my mom would be like, "No, eso es del diablo. Eso no es bueno." Because her belief was that they was bad, like it was like more like brujeria and not necessarily curanderismo. And so learning about the difference and really like being so attracted to that and being so, I understand now where that attraction comes from and why I had such a like curiosity a little bit, because my mom said no. And you know, when your mom says no, you want to do it. Yes. But a little bit because I know how connected it was to my culture, even though my mom had been disconnected from it. You know, thanks to the Compadres networks, a lot of that has been reconnected again.
Yeah, that's a beautiful lessons, you know. I mean, I hear you with that. You definitely have to grow, you know. Like I even see that in my own life. There's things that I did in my 20s and lower that I still, the way I dress, the music I like I didn't really get too far out of my box, you know what I mean? And I think you're definitely right when it comes to, you have to grow, you know, you constantly have to, on other aspects of my life, I've been a lifelong learner and I've seen that. I mean, that's a valuable lesson. And the teachings of your dad, you know, you got to write those dichos down and create a little booklet so that they can have it and, you know, share it with their kids, you know, and how it's going to keep going in that way, you know, special memories for your family and for your family culture. I mean, that's the beautiful thing I think about these ways is that even though we're a part of a bigger culture, you know, in the Mexican American community, but we also have our individual culture. Mexico's a big country, you know, it depends on where you're from and you bring things from your, you know, the city or the village or the the rancho, wherever you came from, you bring a little bit to wherever you're at in your family and stuff like that. I think that's beautiful because people have to create their connections to their culture in a good way. I mean, that's part of La Cultura Cura, is creating a healing culture. And that might work and look differently for certain people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I really appreciate the way you kind of outlined it and the way you've shared it and the way you've grown with it. You know, it's a beautiful teaching, you know, with that, you know. And, you know, that's why I think you're on our advisory council. You do have a lot to offer. And I really appreciate that. So what counsel and advice would you give to others? Other Yelders, other people that are coming up, other teachers, other counselors, because I think in our position in our life, I'm approaching 51 this year, and, you know, life's changed for me in a lot of different ways, and I'm kind of learning to accept it. You know, throughout our lives, we have different roles to play. And I know I'm moving in a different role. You know, I was at this event with a lot of young people, you know, 20 somethings, 30 something. And I realized I'm one of the senior guys here, you know, or people. And it's a different role, the way they talk to you, the way they want wisdom, the way they want certain things. And, you know, it's a different role for us. And so what do you think about that? And what advice would you give to those people that are in that earlier phase of being a Yelder and they're trying to grow, they're trying to figure out life in that way? You know, what advice would you give them?
It's so crazy, Cisco, because there's so many things that are coming into my mind. I remember I was really, really nervous. I was telling B, so B is one of my maestras, and, you know, definitely find people that you want to emulate your life after. Do they have the income that you want? Do they have the life do they want? Do they have the morals, values, and principles that you want? Because if they do, then those are people that you need to listen to. If they're somewhere that you don't want to be, maybe take their advice with a grain of salt. Right? Because whatever it is that they're doing, that's the perspective that they're going to give you. So those are always like my three things. Do I want the life that they have? Am I aligned with the morals, values, and principles that they have? And do I want the income that they have? Those are kind of like the things that I think about all the time. And so B is one of my maestras. And I remember I was just a mess, and I'm sitting in her office and I'm crying. And she's like, Mija, by the time you're 40, life is going to be really different once you turn 40. Like, you're just going to have this epiphany and, you know, all these things. And I'm like, B, well, I have 3 days. Like, I don't think I can get my life together in 3 days. I don't think I can get my life together in 3 days. And so there's so much to be said about the people that you surround yourself with, your associations, the people that you associate with, and what they're doing and the life that they're wanting to lead. Like right now, it's really important to me to surround myself with people that are family oriented. So I want to make sure that that's something that, you know, do they believe in spending quality time with their children? Do they believe in those things? So when I think about what I needed when I was, you know, at the place where I was just starting off in life, I've seen so many educators be chewed up and spit out by our system, right? And at some point they came into the education world wanting to change the world. And at some point they lost sight of that because they tried and they tried and they tried, and, you know, their ideas kept getting shot down, or because they were used to the point where they just needed to set boundaries and they couldn't, you know, stay at school until 7 o'clock every night and just those things. But more than anything, what I think about is start with yourself. Make sure that you're okay. Make sure that you're putting in your survival skills. Make sure that you're doing what you need to do to really be your authentic self. There's a few books I think of. Obviously, the 4 agreements, you know, being impeccable with your word, having palabra. And again, I think of my dad. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the light is red and it doesn't change for 20 minutes, my dad's sitting there waiting for the light to change. Like, he won't ever take the light. Like, he's a man of palabra. And I think of him all the time. But just having your understanding of what your morals, values, and principles are, and just being really solid with that and saying, like, I can't follow someone or I can't take advice from someone who doesn't have my same morals, values, and principles. And I remember when we were first married, my husband would be like, why don't you let your sister do that? Why don't you let your sister do that? And I'd be like, because God's not going to ask me, what did your sister do? God's going to ask me, what did you do? And that's always my place. Nobody's going to ever ask me like, hey, well, you know, why did you do that? Oh, I did it because Cisco did. I'm not responsible for Cisco's life. I'm responsible for my life and the gifts that I've been given. And so I always think that if I were to meet Creator tomorrow and he would ask me, what did you do with the gifts I gave you? Would I be proud of my answer? And I always think about that. And it's something that you need to think about, even if you're young, if you're old, wherever you are. If you know that you're not living the life that Creator created you to live, then what are you going to do to change that? And it's not just when you start your career, it's when you continue your career. And if you're in a place that you're not happy, then what are you going to do? There's a book called Your Oxygen Mask First. It really is so important. You have to take care of your survival first. Because if you're not in a place, how are you going to do that for your kids? Like even in the plane, it says, put your oxygen mask first and then help somebody else. Because if you're pouring from an empty cup, whatever that is that you're giving is empty too.
Exactly.
It's almost like a virus. If you have a virus, you're going to pass the virus. Like you have to be healthy in order to be able to do that. And that's always my advice to educators. Number one, you don't know it all. So allow yourself to be taught, allow yourself to listen, allow yourself to lead. And God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a purpose. We should be listening more than we should be talking, especially when we're younger. Like there's so much that we can learn from people, even people we don't like. We can learn from people we don't like. We can maybe learn what we don't want to be like, but it's still an opportunity to learn. And really, really ask yourself, is what I'm doing right now taking me to the life that I want to lead? Not the life I want to live, the life I want to lead. Because a lot of people live their life and a lot of people lead their life. And there's a big difference between the two. So is what I'm doing right now going to take me and lead me towards the life I want to lead? And sometimes that's a hard question. Because there's so much that we don't want to face, or there's so much that we don't want to deal with. And we tend to talk about people instead of talking to people. And that really, really, really causes us to not be able to be our authentic selves, because we're just going based off of like hearsay and what we think people are thinking, or we think people are this. But just really, really, really be genuine to yourself and who you want to be authentically, and be genuine to the people that you're serving, and allow them. This is always something that's really hard. Kind of, you almost want to be like bumpers, like in bowling. You want to kind of let them be everywhere in the between, but you don't want to let them fall off the edges, because you don't want them to be who you want them to be. You want them to be who they want to be, but with some guidance and encouragement, along the way. So my biggest advice is seek spiritual counsel, seek emotional counsel, have maestros, have, people that are going to be authentic with you. And just be able to say, you know what, Cisco, I love you, and I really think that you're drinking too much, or I think you're doing this too much, or, maybe you want to listen more than you're talking, or maybe because those people that are comfortable enough to be like, hey, you're messing up, are the people that really love you. And we tend to block those people out of our life because we don't want to hear that. Like, we don't want to hear that accountability. We don't want to hear that. And we're like, oh, they're being super negative to me or this, but really, 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 they're helping you be accountable. Like, those are the people you want in your life. The people that kind of almost on the verge of making you uncomfortable, but they're really calling you up and saying, hey, this is not who you were created to be. I know that you have more in you than what you're giving the world. And let's help you get to that point. I think that's the biggest thing. Find people that make you uncomfortable. Maestro makes me uncomfortable. And those questions, those challenging questions, and I don't mean uncomfortable like in a bad way. I mean uncomfortable like, I don't know the answer to that. And it's okay not to know the answer. It's okay not to know what it is, but to know that you want to find the answer. Like, that's the part I think is super valuable. Because a lot of times we get into rooms and people want to tell you how much they know. I want to know people that know how to find the answers, not people that are going to tell me the answers.
Yeah, that is the critical point, right? I mean, what you said about Maestro, I feel the same way, because he's connected in a way and he asks very thought-provoking questions where you're like, oh, I don't know. I never thought about it from that perspective. And that's kind of what I feel like maestros do in a good way, is they kind of spark a thought, like, what if this was what was like this? What would it be like? And how did your trauma in your life really disconnect you from what your real sacred purpose is? A lot of times people trip out on that. They rather do just enough to live, but they're not actually living. And I think that's one of the things I hear from you is, find out if you want a better life, create it for yourself.
Yeah.
And, it's going to take time. It's going to take small changes, but always wanting better, always trying to do better is always a good thing. It always brings growth. And I know people do get stuck, especially Yelders. I feel we get stuck, right? Maybe we're making decisions. Maybe we're trying to get ourselves in a position to have a better life, but you always have to be working towards something. And that takes a lot of vulnerability, which is hard. You know what I mean? Well, trust is one of those hard things for us, So, man, I really appreciate your perspective, how you lay things out. You're definitely a maestra for young women and for people in general. I feel like hopefully within the district, people are leaning on you, those younger counselors, to learn, because you're not going to be here forever. And you want whatever you bring, somebody else could bring it in their own unique way. You know what I mean? I learned a long time ago, even with me, when I was young, they used to put a lot of pressure on me. But also elders used to tell me, help create the people behind you. Help them be the best that they could be. So when you're ready to move on, there's somebody to fill your shoes or wear their own shoes. You know what I mean? Fill yours and more. And that's always critical for us. And I feel like anybody listening, you know what I mean? Like, take the time, learn, get your people, get your maestros, maestras, get your whatever spiritual guidance you might need. Look for it, seek it out, and don't be afraid to try new things. I think that's important, So I just want to thank you, Karina, for just doing all this work that you've been doing over the years, In the future, I definitely want to bring some of the Healing Generations work to the Coachella Valley. I think it's needed, I had somebody reach out to me about, hey, what's going on over there? And so I'm going to connect them your way, just so you know about that, because I think it's important, you and B,
Yes, for sure. You made me think of all of the stories that my dad had said. We can fill a whole podcast just on things that he's taught me. But I remember he used to tell me there was a rio where we lived, and he said that some people scare you to not swim in the river, right? Because they're going to drown, right? And I feel that's kind of how life is. You can be afraid to swim in the river, and he'll be like, don't be afraid. Just know that there's undercurrents. Just know that there's undercurrents and that you can get caught up. Don't let it stop you from swimming, but trucha, be aware that there's undercurrents. And I just kind of feel like that's how life is. You don't want to be too scared to swim in the river because, it's pretty fun swimming in the river. But just be aware that there's things that will stop you and that might hold you back, that might try to drown you, literally. But don't ever be afraid. Don't ever be afraid. Just be strong enough, be wise enough, be smart enough. Have people with you at all times that can help you if you do get caught. To me, that's such a metaphor for life. Don't be scared. Swim in the river. Just know that there's going to be, all these things. There's going to be all these, things that people want to impose on you, and just don't let it. Just surround yourself with people that are going to keep you happy and healthy and strong, and that are going to help you not just survive, but live your authentic life. So thank you for having me on. I super appreciate it. Anything that you need, ya sabes, we're always here for you. Anything that you need.
All right. Thank you again. Is there any last thoughts or any way people could get in contact with you if they're inspired in any way? I don't know if you're willing to share your Instagram or anything like that, or Facebook. I'll leave that up to you. But, of course, if there's a way for people to, to get inspired, and I want to remind people, maybe there's somebody like Karina in your life that, you think we should share their story, reach out to us, because that's part of it, is how do we tell these stories about healing and resiliency that could really, help inspire us to keep doing what we're doing or change our current situation. Because I know a lot of people who reach out to me, that just say, you know what, where do I start? I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, for sure. My Instagram is actually my married name, which is Sustaita. So it's Kari, it's Kari, Sustaita _. So it's Kari Sustaita _. And yeah, for sure. And it's so funny. The other day, somebody sent me a message on Instagram and they're like, I need some help. And somebody said to reach out to you. And I was like, sure, how can I help you? And she's like, there's a trash can outside of my classroom that hasn't been thrown out, right? So then I'm like, okay, what school are you at? Well, she ended up being at a school that's not even in our district. but what's funny, Cisco? What's funny? I actually knew somebody from their school, and I actually got her trash thrown out.
Nice.
But yeah, like I definitely want to make sure that people know that I'm here to help, that I definitely advocate, for just a lot of different things. And really more than anything, challenging what the society expectation is versus doing what's right and what's proper and what's actually going to help you live a better life, like a more fulfilled life. So yeah, it's Kari Sustaita, Karina Vega Sustaita on Facebook. Anything that I can do, anything that I can help, I definitely love. More than anything, I love to serve my community and just really be a voice for the people that just are not ready to use their voice yet. I don't want to say voiceless because they have a voice, they're just not ready to use it yet. So anything that I can do to help, that I'm just a phone call or a text away.
I appreciate that immensely. I just want to thank all our listeners again. Please share the podcast, introduce it to people. And of course, I welcome any feedback, positive or negative. That's how we get better. I'm not perfect. I'm doing the best I can myself and the rest of the hosts, we definitely want to grow. And, we like to make partners wherever we can, So reach out to us. Again, the National Compadres Network.org. You can find us on the web, on Facebook, all the socials, find us and give us some feedback. I really appreciate that. Again, I just want to tell everybody this healing journey takes time, takes commitment. It takes willingness to dig deep sometimes and unpack things in our life that affected us, that keep us with susto, keep us with this fear for us to move on. And that's why we utilize our medicines, or utilize our teachings from our culture, like the Olin, that this sacred movement. If we could work on that and really try to keep ourselves moving no matter what comes our way, and it's all right to ask for help and guidance and all those things, and be useful for people. So with that, I want to just thank everybody one last time and say until next time, a rato en palabra.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.